And then if you want to talk to us, you do it through the chat window. If you don't have the chat window up, if you kind of move your mouse on the screen, hopefully at the bottom you'll see a little thing that comes up that says chat. And then you can click that and hopefully a chat window will come up on the right of your screen. I'll give you a moment to look at that. Today we've got Kojo who's going to be helping us, and Chris is also here that's going to be helping us. I'm going to walk through the first part of the seminar. If you have questions, please feel free to type them out. It's a lot easier that way. Obviously, without having a room, and you can't really put your hand up, so we'd have everybody talking over each other if we did it a different way. So please type your questions as you go, and please type them anytime. So you know, don't have to wait till the end of the presentation or the section or anything like that. Just if you have a question, just type it out, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. Because I can see them, and Kojo can see them, and Chris can see them, so we might respond to you through the chat window, or I might do it as I'm talking here. We've got 44 participants right now. So we are going to record this seminar, just so everybody knows, and that recording will be available, I believe, on our website. In terms of the seminar material in text form, I've got a question here. We have a little bit of a condensed seminar that we can give to everybody in PDF form is better. There are some videos in this that take up a lot of space. So if a committee wants them, we can maybe get to you that way. But for just to look through it, we can do it in PDF form. It is going to be available on our website, I think. Is that right, Chris? I'm hoping I'm not talking out of turn.
No, you're not talking out of term. We are in the process right now of uploading the, it's basically an hour-long club presentation. So there will be a PDF of what we would talk about if we came to your club for an hour. And then there will be links to a number of different videos that will be referred to that will help people understand what the whole system is.
Okay, so we're going to try to support everybody through this process, obviously. And hopefully things get back to normal here. Who knows when. Okay, so Kojo's advancing the slides here for me. So in this workshop, we're going to go through some introductions to the World Handicapping System and a welcome to it. There are some videos, and when we do the video, we kind of have to get out of the PowerPoint and then put the video up. So bear with Kojo as he does that. But the videos are very well done, given to us by the RNA and the USJ, I believe, made some, and they're very well done. We're going to talk about the fundamentals in handicapping, the new handicap formula, the club handicap committee responsibilities, the competition committee responsibilities, and then basically our responsibility. So an AGA is basically who we are. We're BC Golf, and that's us. So how we administer the handicap index. Kojo, if you can go to the next one, that'd be great. Okay, so we're going to go through a video here.
The World Handicap System is designed to welcome all players to the sport, regardless.
Bear with Kojo here for a second.
The World Handicap System is designed to welcome all players to the sport, regardless of age, gender, ability, or nationality, no matter what sort of golf they like to play or how much time they have. All players are encouraged to get a handicap index, giving them a sense of their golfing ability, allowing them to track their performance, and providing a score to aim for, no matter where they're playing or how well they play. It's a myth that you must be good to have a handicap. The whole purpose of the World Handicap System is to allow for greater enjoyment whether playing for competitive reasons or having fun. With a maximum handicap index of 54, the World Handicap System is accessible and inclusive, meeting the needs of players new to the game as well as those that have played for a long time. To obtain a first handicap index, a player needs to complete a minimum number of holes in an authorised format of play and submit scores in accordance with the rules of handicapping. The system is flexible. Players may submit 18-hole or 9-hole scores if more appealing, or any combination of the two. For players with limited time, the rules of handicapping help support a good pace of play. Where the format allows, players are encouraged to pick up when they have reached their maximum hole score or when they are out of a hole in a team or match play format. With scores submitted promptly after each round, a player's handicap index can be updated ready for the next day or soon after, giving them instant feedback on their progress. There is a balance to be drawn between inclusiveness and the safeguards required to ensure your handicap index truly reflects your golfing ability. A poor run of form won't increase your handicap index too quickly, while rapidly improving ability is recognised by applying additional reductions to your index for exceptional scores. Your score must either be verified by a marker or reviewed by peers. If you fail to submit a score when required, a penalty score may be applied to your scoring record. Golf clubs and handicap committees play a major role in welcoming new players to the sport and managing their handicaps. They may offer separate competitions for different handicap ranges, or separate scratch and handicap prizes, allowing players of all abilities to enjoy the thrill of competition. At least once a year, handicap committees will review players' handicaps to ensure they continue to reflect their ability. These measures combine to maintain the integrity of the game while promising a system that works for every player, whether competing for a trophy or playing their first round.
Well, Coach, are you going to be able to get us back to the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Are you guys wanting us to ask questions along the way?
So if you could mute yourselves and ask questions by typing in the chat window, that would be great. And then we'll try to answer them that way. There should be a little, if you move your mouse a little bit, a bar comes up at the bottom and you should be able to see chat. And if you click on that, you should be able to text, or not text, but type, sorry. So just give you a little history of the World Handicap System, why we're doing this. Prior to 2020, we had 6 different systems around the world. You can see where they are here, and they're very, very different. If you've ever been to the UK, you know, they would play medal rounds once a month, I think, to do a handicap or to get a handicap. There's not many regions of the world that actually had a slope and course rating like we have for many years now. In Australia, they play a lot of Stableford golf, and their handicap system was totally different. So the idea was, just like the rules of golf, to bring all the handicapped systems into one, and so that we just have one system around the world, and that handicap can be used anywhere you go. I know, as an example, I worked at Bear Mountain, and we had a gentleman come from South Africa and wanted to bring his handicap with him. And when I looked at the system, there was no way to, he had to start from scratch because there was no way to bring that handicap with him the way they did it there. So just a little bit of things there. Go to maybe the next slide. So obviously we're going to go to one system, and we've gone to one system as of January 1st this year. Next slide, Kojo. So the governance structure, we're now going to have a rules of golf. We're going to have a rules of amateur status. Well, we do have rules of amateur status actually being looked at right now and will be updated very soon. We have the equipment rules, and we have the World Handicap System. And we've mailed out the rules of handicapping to everybody. It comes exactly like the rules book. So the World Handicap, the rules of handicapping looks exactly like the rules of golf, and it's a very nice presentation, and it makes sense, and it's no longer a manual per se. It's actually the rules of handicapping. Get the next slide there, perfect. So just so you know how this works in terms of top down, the USJ and the RNA are the governing authorities, and then they give out the authorizations to use the World Handicapping Systems to the National Association, which in our case would be Golf Canada. And then underneath Golf Canada, National Association is the Allied Golf Association, that's us, with BC Golf. And then we give that responsibility down to the golf club and the handicap committee, which is in a lot of cases people on this webinar. And then obviously as last is the player that is supposed to be honest and put in the best score possible at each round and submit all his or her scores. So basically we are licensed, Golf Canada is licensed by the USGA and the RNA, BC Golf is licensed by Golf Canada, and then each golf club, BC Golf is licensed by Golf Canada, and then each golf club is licensed by BC Golf. All right, what do we got here? Okay. So in order to use the World Handicap System, the association must be authorized by the USGA and the RNA. Within its area's jurisdiction, an authorized national association we can use the rules of handicapping and course rating system, use the registered trademarks of the World Handicapping System, and issue a handicap index either directly or where delegated through a golf club. So just like before, most of our members of BC Golf will be affiliated with a golf club, but there are players that aren't affiliated with a golf club, and we still will have the BC Players Club, so people can get a handicap index who aren't affiliated with a golf club. Next slide there, perfect, thanks Kojo. So we've got 7 parts to the rules of handicapping. Rule 1 is the purpose and authorization. Rule 2, the score, we go over the scores that are acceptable for handicap purposes. Rule 3, adjustment of hole scores. Rule 4, submitting a score. Rule 5 is the handicap index calculation. And Rule 6 is the course handicap and playing handicap calculation. We'll go over all these as we go through this today, just so everybody knows. And Rule 7 kind of is what the committee can do, and what committee actions could take place. There'll also be 7 appendices, which will further details. So the rule book hopefully covers everything, just like the rules of golf. Sometimes things will come up, I'm sure, as we get going that might not, and certain decisions will be made. But they've done a really good job putting this together, and so everybody knows this has been a long process putting this together, and it has been, I guess you call it, in beta and tested around the world in different circumstances, and been working very well. Next slide, Kojo. So it includes the rules of handicapping and the course rating system. We're lucky here in Canada. We've been using what's called the USGA course rating system for a number of years now, so we don't have any change. You can imagine in some areas of the world where they haven't had courses haven't been rated, they've had to rate all their golf courses, and sometimes in a very short period of time. So I don't know how many courses are in the UK, 2,000 or 3,000, and they've had to go out there and try to rate them all. So it's a big process for some people in different parts of the world. Obviously, we want as many golfers as we can to obtain and maintain a handicap index. We want them to use their handicap index on any golf course around the world and compete or play recreationally with anyone else on a fair basis. And obviously, that's the purpose of the handicap. One of our things that separates golf from every other sport is that we can play together, different skill levels, and actually have a competition and make it fair and fun for everybody. Okay, I've been told that maybe I need to speak up, so I'll try to speak up a little louder. So Kojo has a video I think he's going to try to bring up for us.
Every golfer is different. Every golf course is different. Every day is different. The aim of the World Handicap System is to take all these differences and produce a single measure of a player's golfing ability. A handicap index reflecting the score a player can achieve when playing well. To do that, it must start with a handicap calculation which balances responsiveness and stability, consistency and flexibility. At the core of the handicap calculation is your score, demonstrating how well you played your round relative to the course's difficulty, as determined by its course rating and slope rating, and any conditions that might have made the course harder or easier to play on the day. A record of your scores is maintained, and your handicap index is based on an average of the best 8 of your last 20 scores. Because your worst scores are discarded, Your handicap index reflects the score you're likely to achieve on your better days. The more scores you can submit, the more accurately your handicap index will reflect your golfing ability. While any player can have a bad day or a run of poor form, form is temporary. That's why the handicap calculation does more than just look at your most recent best scores. It retains a memory of your lowest handicap index during the past 12 months and provides mechanisms to ensure bad days don't cause your current handicap index to increase too quickly from that low index. Under normal circumstances, your handicap index should never increase more than 5 strokes above your low handicap index over a rolling 12-month period. Players have great days too. Juniors and beginners in particular can improve dramatically over a short period of time. The handicap calculation can identify this, applying additional reductions to a handicap index when a player achieves a score of 7 strokes or more below their current handicap index. A calculation won't always detect a real change in a player's ability. For that reason, each golf club's handicap committee has the tools and can adjust a player's handicap index to better reflect their current ability. All these elements come together as your handicap index is revised promptly, ready for the next day or soon after. The World Handicap System delivers a handicap index to all players that is calculated in a consistent way across the globe. It allows players everywhere to continue to enjoy the game they love, wherever they play and whoever they're playing with or against.
So there's a lot in that video. We're going to go through almost all of it during this presentation. So if some of it kind of didn't quite make sense or you have questions about it, please just save them for a little bit because we're going to go through it during this presentation. All right. So with obviously one system now around the world, we want everybody to have a home club and to ensure that player only has one handicap index. So basically, wherever a player plays their most golf should be their home club. So we have a lot of players in BC that might go south in the wintertime and play at a golf course, and they may even be a member of a golf course down south. They're going to have to make a decision. Do they play more rounds of golf down south than they do here? Then their home club might be in Arizona somewhere. Or their home club is going to be in BC, and even when they are playing in Arizona or California, wherever they are, they're going to post their score from that one place, from their home club. Obviously, it'll be an away score. But does that make sense? So some players, just so you know, in the past have had a handicap with Golf Canada. They've also had a handicap with the USGA under the GIN system. That shouldn't be any longer. They should just have one handicap, one home club. Okay, next, Kojo. Yeah. Acceptability of scores. So this hasn't changed a lot, but just so we go through it. Obviously, scores from an authorized format of play, which meets all the provisions set out within the rules of handicapping. We're not going to go through all those. Scores in both match play and stroke play, including multi-ball or team competitions where players have not completed one or more holes, or players are requested to pick up another contention of a hole. And we'll go over a little bit about how you do that. And scores in all courses with a current course rating and slope rating made during an active season, both home and away. So if you do go someplace and play a course that isn't course rated or slope rated, then you won't be able to really to enter that score. Hopefully within the next little bit, every course in the world will have a course and slope rating. Okay, Kojo, yeah, thank you. Scores made under the rules of golf and or the modified rules of golf for players with disabilities. There was an issue about playing alone and whether those scores could be submitted or not under the World Handicap System. You do need to be accompanied by at least one other person, or at least have a marker. When a player follows a model or local rule, even if the committee has not adopted it. So if the committee has not, for example, adopted the alternative option to stroke and distance or preferred lies, but the player does play with that model rule, they can still submit their score. A score is not acceptable for handicap purposes and it must not be posted to a player's scoring record. If a player has been disqualified from competition for a breach of the rules, that might have had a significant advantage. Other examples, sometimes foursomes are known as alternate shots. Very tough to post a score there, so you can't. Scrambles, you can't post a score. Or if you go on the golf course with your instructor and you have a playing lesson, that score shouldn't be posted. So the type of play, we do have a competition, general play, 9-hole round. So these are things that are going to come up on your scoring record. You'll see these, the bolded ones, the C and the N. The format of play, whether it's stroke or match play, where the round was played, either home or away. Other details, that might be an incomplete round. Maybe you played 16 holes, you should still post that score. And there could be an exceptional score or a penalty score, which we'll talk about later on. For an 18-hole score to be acceptable for handicap purposes, a minimum of 14 holes must be played. That's a little bit of a change. So if a player plays 14 to 17 holes, an 18-hole score will be produced by adding a score of net par for the remaining holes. So if you play 14 holes, for those last 4 holes, you basically assume that you got a score of net par. So that'll be different depending on what your handicap is. You add that into your score, come up with an 18-hole score, and submit that. For a 9-hole score to be acceptable for handicap purposes, a minimum of 7 holes must be played. So if a player plays 7 or 8 holes, a 9-hole score will be produced by adding a score of net par for the remaining holes, the same as 18-hole scores. This is a big change for what used to be called equitable stroke control. It's now called maximum score for handicap purposes, or maximum score. And it is net double bogey. So obviously that gets us into par, which we'll go into a little bit lower, but a player's maximum hole score for handicap purposes, ensuring bad holes don't impact a player handicap too severely, and that is set at net double bogey. I think I go to the next slide, Kojo. So this is how net double bogey is calculated. It's basically par plus 2 plus any handicap strokes that are received or given. So believe it or not, somebody like myself, if I play a forward tee, I'm going to be like a +4 these days. I might have to actually give some strokes back, but mostly we receive strokes. And so a par 4, obviously, sorry, I'll read this out. A player with a course handicap of 11 receives 1 stroke on the first 11 allocated stroke holes. On a par 4 with a stroke index of 6, the player's net double bogey score is calculated as follows: par plus 2, and they get 1 stroke on there because they're 11 handicap, and at the 6th stroke hole they get 1 stroke, and so 7 would be their maximum score. So here's Janet Smith playing, and go ahead one more, Kojo. Is there another part of this slide? Yeah, there we go. So she had an 8 on the 17th hole, but that would be a 7 would be the maximum she could take there. So she'd have to adjust her score by 1. Everybody okay with that? So thank you, Kojo. So score for competition is 95, and the score for handicap purposes is 94. So it hasn't really, just the way that's changed. Yeah, so we'll just pause for some questions on that. Yes, Arlene, if the person enters hole by hole, which we'll get into, we really recommend, and that you recommend to your players, that we enter scores hole by hole. If they do that, the computer will automatically adjust. But if you don't enter hole by hole, then obviously the computer doesn't know, and we have to adjust it ourselves. Okay, so actually hole by hole entering it takes care of a lot of things. The computer, if you do it hole by hole, there's basically no way you can screw up. So we're hopefully we get more and more people to do that. There's no way to make somebody do it hole by hole. We are going to recommend that at your kiosk, I believe Kojo can correct me if I'm wrong, you can set the default that comes up to hole by hole. But right now with the program, they could switch it over to enter just a gross score, or an 18-hole score or 9-hole score. And on the app, you can do it hole by hole, or if you're at home on your computer, you could do it either way, or on the app, you could do it either way. Right now, Golf Canada hasn't made the decision to make everybody do it hole by hole. We think that will actually dissuade players from some players from entering a score at all, and we don't want to do that. We want people to obviously enter every score.
Right. Yeah. So just to add to that, on the kiosk, which is the screen that members see when they are posting at the club, on that kiosk we can set the default to be hole by hole posting. But when the members log in online or when they log in through the app, the default would be what they have set for themselves. So on my app, I have set the default to be hole by hole entry, but it used to be a total score. So we can set it, if you let me know, we can set your kiosk. If members post through the kiosk, we can set it so that the default that comes up when they go to the kiosk is hole by hole and not total score.
Thanks. And for anybody who hasn't met Kojo, obviously that's him talking, and hopefully you'll get to meet him in person. Probably not right now, but sometime in the near future. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Any more questions on that? You know, if you can, just feel free to keep typing your questions in the chat box. We will deal with them as you type them in. At the end of each session also, we will pause, and if you have any questions, you can ask. Doug, if you want to keep going.
Sure, I can keep going. Unless Chris wants to get in here.
No, I'm good.
Okay. So as I kind of mentioned before, if a hole isn't played, so let's say you play 16 holes and decide that's enough for you today, you're going to walk in. You still want to post that score. And so when a player does not play a hole, the score recorded for handicap purposes is net par. For example, a hole being declared out of play by the committee for maintenance or reconstruction purposes, or I know there's certain golf courses where a lot of players, maybe there's a big hill on 17 and 18, they don't play those holes and they come in. We really want to make sure that they're still posting those scores. It's important for them to maintain a proper handicap. This is a guideline for most likely score in case you don't, this is for a hole you started but don't complete. So when a player starts but does not complete a hole, the score recorded for handicap purposes is the most likely score. So in the rules of handicapping, if you're on the putting green within 5 feet of the hole, you're going to assume that you made that putt and you add one additional stroke. If you're between 5 feet and 20 yards from the hole, you're going to add 2 or 3 additional strokes depending on the position of the ball, the difficulty of the green, and the ability of the player. So you're going to have to make a call and say, yeah, you know what, I can get that up and down most times, I'm going to add 2. Or you know what, my chances of me getting it up and down weren't very good, I'm going to add 3 strokes. If you're beyond 20 yards from the hole, you're going to add 3 or 4 strokes, again, depending on your ability and where that ball is. So hope that makes sense to everybody. This is important. A player should submit their score as soon as possible on the day of play and preferably before midnight. There's some reasons for that we'll go into. Well, I guess right now. If a player does not submit their score on the day of play, their score will not be included within the daily playing conditions calculation. And we're going to go over that a little bit more, what that is. When the score is subsequently posted to the player's scoring record, the published playing conditions calculation for the day should be applied to the player's score differential calculation. A lot of big words in there. So 2 things I want you to take out of this slide. One, we're trying to really recommend to everybody that they post their score on the day they played before midnight. That way their score will be counted towards this playing conditions calculation. But if they don't post it on that day, when they do post it, they should date it on the correct day that they played. So if you forgot to post a score and it's a week later, you want to make sure you post your score on the day you predate it to the day that you played, because if there was a playing conditions calculation, that will be applied to the score. I got a question here about the hole 13 has a natural stopping on somebody's course. So under the WHS, it's not actually a choice. If they only play 13 holes, it is a 9-hole score they post. If they play 14 holes or more, it's an 18-hole score they post. Hopefully that answers that question. Minimum scores to obtain a handicap index, this has changed. It's only 54 holes now, can be made up of any combination of 9 or 18 holes. There's no time limit on completing the submission of these scores, and strong recommendation that initial scores be submitted hole by hole to better assess the potential of the player. Go to the next slide, Kojo. Combine two 9-hole scores to create an 18-hole score differential. So if a player plays 7 or more holes, but fewer than the minimum number of holes for an 18-hole score, so that's fewer than 18, fewer than 14, as we just said, then the 9-hole score will be posted and then combined with the next 9-hole score. Now these don't have to be, you don't have to play the front 9 and the back 9. It could be 9 holes from Capilano and 9 holes from McCleary. Sorry, I'm talking to the interior to use different golf courses. But those 9-hole scores can be combined because each nine holes of a golf course, if it's 18 holes, has its own course rating, has its own slope rating. And so any two 9-hole scores can be combined. So don't worry if you've always just play the front 9 of the golf course, those can be combined. There are 5 significant changes to the handicap index. The minimum number of scores is 3. The number of differentials used is no longer 10, it's now 8. There is this playing conditions calculation, which we will get into. There's an exceptional score reduction that considers all scores. We'll get into that. So there's no longer, we used to have these tournament scorers and we'd have to do some things. Now it's basically automatic and called an exceptional score. And the addition of a soft cap and hard cap to limit the upward movement, which we'll also go over later on in this presentation. So for an 18-hole score, a score differential is calculated as follows. Number 113 is kind of that neutral golf course. So it's 113 divided by the slope rating. And then you multiply that by the adjusted gross score minus the course rating minus if there's any playing conditions calculation. And that's how we come up with a score differential. Okay, good. We got an example here. So a lower score may not always produce a lower score differential. You can see that this person shot 97, but the course rating was higher and the slope rating was much higher. So their score differential is actually lower than when they shot a 95. So the score differential doesn't mean, it changes depending on the course rating and the slope rating of that course. And it could be also a playing conditions calculation in there. We've always had a table like this in terms of the number of differentials used. You can see here right now, I don't want to go through all these, but if you only have 3 scores, your lowest one is used and there's adjustment of -2. And then by the time you get up to 20 scores, it's the average of the lowest 8 and there is no adjustment. We've gotten rid of, there used to be a multiplier in there. I think it was 0.96, Kojo would know better. There's no more multiplier like anymore. It's just the average of whatever number of scores we're using. Is that okay? Okay. So for 20 scores, the average the lowest 8 of the most, average the lowest 8 of the most recent 20 score differentials and round to the nearest 10th. So it's just the last 20 scores in your record, take the average of that, take the average of the lowest 8 and round to the nearest 10th, and that's your handicap index. We are back to the term index, so everybody knows. Here's an example of the USGA handicapping system, which is the same as us. We were under the same system, and the World Handicapping System, if you look at the same scores, it doesn't change very much. So hopefully, I think it was like January 8th or something like that, we got onto the World Handicapping System, and your index would have changed, but very minimally. In most cases, it doesn't change very much. You see this change from 12.9 to 13.3. One of the videos talked about this already. The maximum handicap index is 54. Basically, we want to be inclusive and accessible as possible. We want to make it really easy for somebody to get a handicap index. Oh, Kojo, I think something happened there. There we go. That was just me, I'm not sure. So you know what the maximums were before. We'll say this later on, but I'll say it now. That doesn't mean that you have to have 54 as a maximum handicap in your competitions. You can set that maximum at whatever you want for your competitions. This is just in general for the World Handicapping System. Somebody's maximum handicap is 54 now. It lets people get a handicap sooner, and it lets more people get a handicap and makes it as inclusive as possible, which is one thing the World Handicapping System really wanted to do. Next slide there, Kojo. So under the rules of handicapping, a handicap index will update immediately after posting and also may be updated the day after a score is posted. Players should submit their scores as soon as possible. This is to ensure the score will be used for the playing conditions calculation. And a player's handicap index can also be revised by a committee adjustment, which hopefully won't have to do very often, but it can be. Some areas of the world, the United States as an example, their handicap index was only adjusted or brought up to date every 2 weeks. It stayed the same for 2 weeks, and then it was refreshed, I guess you could say. Ours has been doing it every day for a long time, so this isn't really new for us. Next slide, Kojo. Okay, we're gonna get into this a little bit. The playing conditions calculation. When adverse weather conditions or abnormal course setup causes scores to be unusually high or low on a given day, a playing conditions calculation will adjust score differentials to better reflect the player's actual performance. The PCC will be simple and conservative in nature and will be adjusted in integer values, so there's no decimals. Basically, if on a really easy day, your score might be made 1 stroke higher. On a really, really tough day, it could be up to 3 strokes lower. Lots of things can affect this. It's just done by an algorithm, depending on the scores that go in. This is not a decision made by anybody. This is just done automatically by the system. You don't have to worry about doing this yourself or anything like that. And it is very conservative. It is performed only once a day, considers acceptable scores submitted on a golf course, including all rated tees and both genders. It does require, though, at least 8 acceptable scores submitted by players with a handicap index of 36 or below. It is applied in the calculation of score differentials for all players. So even if you don't submit your score on that day, but you did play on that day, if you date your score properly, it will be applied to that because you played on that day. And it includes both 9-hole and 18-hole acceptable scores. So I'm the tournament director for BC Golf. When we set up a golf course, we might set it up really tough one day for the BC Amateur, and maybe the scores are going to be really higher than they should be in that day because we've tucked the pins and double rolled the greens, and so maybe a PCC will be applied depending on the scores that come in. So that's brand new. Any questions on what we're now calling a PCC? People a little time to think about that. No hands going up? No? So again,
well,
you don't, oh, here we go. I got one, okay.
Okay, go ahead. I guess we have to wait for this person to finish typing, but a couple of comments on the PCC. Does the score get flagged as an anomaly? Well, no, the score doesn't get flagged. If you look at your scoring record, you would see that there is a new column that has adjustments. And so if PCC is applied, it will simply show your regular score differential, and then it will show you the adjusted score differential. And so if there's a difference between the regular score differential and the adjusted, then it means that PCC or some type of an adjustment has been applied. Unfortunately, the screen is not big enough to show all the different adjustments that have been applied, but you will be able to take a look through how your handicap index is calculated to see if any adjustments have been applied, including PCC. Now, the last time we had this seminar, which was on the island, I was yet to see a PCC, and between then and now, I've actually seen a PCC applied. And of all places, it was this member who had gone to Mexico to play golf. And he came back when we looked at his record, PCC had indeed been applied for the golf that he played in Mexico. And so we do know that it is being applied, and you may see it. Now, there's also been questions about whether PCC, how PCC will be applied when you have, for example, a temporary tees, or you have winter rules, or even playing during the inactive season. And all of those things, we are yet to see the effect of PCC on the scoring. But one of the ways that we can gauge to see whether your course rating reflects the difficulty of the course is that if PCC is being applied too frequently, then it may mean that the course and slope rating that we have assigned to your golf course may not be accurate. So we will be monitoring all of this. Of course, this is new for all of us, so we'll be monitoring how PCC gets applied. But I have seen it apply for someone who played in Mexico. Right, but now I'll get to the questions. Does the PCC get applied through an average of the score submitted to the system that day? How does the system calculate it? So the summary of how the PCC is calculated is that there has to be some conditions before PCC is applied. The first one is that there must be at least 8 scores posted by golfers who have at least 20 scores in their scoring record, and their index is 36 or less. And the reason why we have 36 or less is simply because new golfers sometimes can improve too quickly for the system. And so the PCC will not, the calculation will not start unless 8 people have posted that day. And that's why Doug in the presentation said you have to post by midnight of the local time. So 8 people posting by midnight of the local time. And the 8 people must have had at least 20 games posted in their record, and also that they must be 36 index or lower. And then the system, what the system does is that it's able to calculate what the expected scoring for all these 8 scores posted, 8 or more scores posted. It knows the expected scoring based on, of course, the 20 scores that have been posted. And so if the scoring for that particular day is way out of the expected scoring for all the minimum 8, then the system goes into whether to apply a PCC. So that's how it knows. It doesn't use the weather. It doesn't use any external factors. It simply looks at the scoring by doing a calculation as to what the expected scoring is. And if the scoring for that day is out of the expected scoring, then the PCC calculation begins. And the PCC is conservative in nature, as Doug had mentioned. So it should rarely be applied. And if it's applied too often, then it may mean that we may have to come back and re-rate your golf course. What does the acronym stand for? And can this be done only by you guys? What if we have an Ironman, etc.? That's a very good question. So PCC simply means playing conditions calculation. And so it does a calculation to see, as you may know, when we do the course and slope rating, we rate the golf course for how the golf course plays in the summertime. And we actually are told to imagine playing conditions on July 1st. So the golf course course and slope rating represents the best of the best conditions for the golf course. So the PCC calculation, or the playing conditions calculation, comes in if the play for a particular day doesn't represent the measured course and slope rating. Then the PCC is applied to compensate for the conditions. Now keep in mind that not only bad weather or bad play days would have PCC applied, exceptionally good play days would also have PCC applied. So, in the manual, the rules of handicapping, it shows us how PCC can be applied more than once a day. So when you are going to post a score, you would see that part of the score posting process, it will ask you if the score you are posting is a tournament score, now referred to as a competition score. It will ask you whether it's match play. It will ask you whether it's stroke play. Now, all of these questions are to determine if PCC should be applied more than once. So if there was a tournament, there was a competition in the morning, and you played in that competition, and you checked off competition for that day, then the system would know that the PCC should be applied to you because you played in that competition. And then those who played that day and don't check off competition, the system would know they didn't play in that competition. So PCC will not be applied to them. So that's how the system will be able to determine when to apply PCC and to who to apply PCC. Next question, how far away from the handicap does a score have to be before PCC will apply? Well, the calculation is done by midnight of the day of play, but once the calculation is done, if the system determines that PCC should be applied, then anyone who posts a score and picks that day as the day of play will have PCC applied. So if you post your score a week after or the day after, if PCC was applied for that day's play, yours will, the PCC will be applied to your score for that day. But if you post outside of the midnight, then your score will not be used to calculate whether PCC applies. That's the difference. If PCC applies, everyone who played that day gets the benefit of the PCC. But if you don't post by midnight, then your score for that day will not be factored in to see whether PCC ought to apply for that day. Next question, PCC set once a day, would this be done before first tee time of the day? I guess you mean first tee time of the next day. So if I understand this question correctly, the question is if a PCC will be applied by the tee time of the next day, and I should think, yes, PCC should have been applied by the tee time of the next day, because all of this is done on computer and nobody has to go in and trigger the calculation. What should happen is that by the midnight, the system should automatically go in and do a calculation across all the information in the database, whether PCC should be applied. And I would presume that my assumption would be that definitely by the next sunrise, PCC would already have been applied. Is a weekly ladies or men's night a competition? Well, that's a question that goes sort of outside of the PCC, but there is a criteria on how to designate a competition. But regular men's night, regular ladies' night, I don't believe is designated as competition. Doug, you can come in here if I get it wrong, but a regular men's night, at least under the old system, was not a competition. And
no, you're right, Kojo. We wouldn't recommend the weekly ladies or men's night be a competition. A competition should have rules officials, should be pretty standard and a little more serious than a men's night or a weekly ladies.
Right. Okay. Thank you. The last question we have here, you said outside of expected scores. How far above or below do these 8 scores have to be before PCC is applied? Well, the algorithm that the system uses actually hasn't been published, but the explanation has been given by the World Handicap Committee, and the explanation is that the system looks at expected scoring ranges, and that's how it determines if PCC should be applied. So I can't answer the question how far outside of the expected scores, but we do know that the algorithm has been built in so that it looks at the expected scoring ranges for everyone who posts for that day based on their last 20 games. And it takes the 8 minimum scores. If there are more than 8 scores posted for that day, then the system will look at all the scores posted for that day and come to the conclusion whether PCC should be applied. There are in the handicap manual, there are interpretations, the rules of handicapping. There are interpretations with a whole lot of questions and answers as to how PCC will be applied. And we won't go through all of that, but once you get your hands on it, you can take a look through it. It goes through, if there are competitions played in the morning, in the afternoon, you are part of it, you are not part of it, how would the system know? And the system would know when you are posting your score, the questions that it will ask you, whether it's match play, whether it's stroke play, whether you were in a competition. All of those answers to those questions is what it uses to determine if PCC should be applied for that day. So the question from Anne says, I play in a competition where the pins are tough. It's finished at 1 p.m. and now the general public will play with these tough pins. Does the system factor this in? And the answer is yes, the system will factor it in. Obviously, the system won't have the information as to the fact that the pins were tough for that day. So it will use what the scoring was for that day to determine if PCC adjustment should be made. So yes, the system it's built into the system to be able to figure out if PCC should be applied by looking at the scoring for that day. Another question from Anne. I play in a competition. Oh, same question. All right. So I trust that answers it all. Any more questions, please feel free to type it in. We'll wait for maybe another 10 seconds or so, and then Doug will proceed.
Yeah, I think the only, like to answer Anne a little bit more, if the pins were changed, that would be even, you know, then it really matters that all those scores before 1 p.m. are labeled as competition. If the pins aren't changed and everybody's playing the same golf course, then obviously it's the same for everybody. And if PCC needs to be applied, it'll be applied to everybody. When it really is important that you tell if somebody's in a competition or not is if the golf course has changed, the tees or the pins are changed for during a day, but that happens very, very rarely. So be a very rare thing.
Okay, Doug, I'll take over for you here. It's Chris Jonason.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Memory of low handicap index. This is a concept where the handicap system will, for a 365-day period, remember what an individual's player low handicap index is. And it will be used to make a number of different calculations which can further compress a player's handicap if there are such things as exceptional scoring. So the low handicap index represents the demonstrated ability of a player over a 365-day or 1-year period preceding the most recent score in the player's scoring record, and provides a reference point against which the current handicap index can be compared. So the example that you're looking at is a golfer who plays on April the 25th, 2021, and submitted a score which produced a handicap index of 7.1. The low handicap index in the preceding 365 days is 6.2. When the player plays again in May, the low handicap index of 6.2 would still be used for the cap procedure, but then even though it's more than 12 days old, but then the next day, the new low handicap index would be set. So you can just kind of think about that, but it's a 365-day calculation. There is no limit on the amount by which a player's handicap index can decrease, but there are 2 trigger points that will limit extreme upward movement of a handicap index. So your handicap index should never improve more than 5 strokes. So the 2 procedures that will kick in is a soft cap followed by a hard cap, which will be limited to limit the extreme upward movement of a player's handicap within a 12-month period. The soft cap suppresses upward movement by 50% after a 3.0 stroke increase over the low handicap index has been reached. The hard cap restricts the upward movement to a player's handicap when you've reached more than 5 strokes over the low handicap index. And these calculations only start to take effect once the player has a full handicap number of scores within their scoring record, or 20 scores. So if you look at the playing calculations, and you'll find all of these in the handicap manual, which can be read online through Golf Canada, or every club has already been mailed a hard copy of the handicap index, so it's somewhere around the club. But in this example, player A has the low handicap index of 10. His current 8 of 20 average is 15.5. So in step 1, the system would subtract the low handicap index from the current 8 of 20, or 15.2 minus 10, to come up with the number of 5.2. We determine how much greater than 3.0 the result is. So 5.2 minus 3 equals 2.2, and we would subtract 50% of the resulting value from the 8 of 20 average. So if their current 8 of 20 indicates an index of 15.2, we would subtract half of 2.2. So the handicap index that is shown for that particular player would be 14.1 rather than 15.2. In the hard cap example, the player has now exceeded his low handicap index by more than what's required. So in this example, a player has a low handicap index of 10.0. His current 8 of 20 average is 17.4. So in step 1, we would subtract the low handicap index from the current 8 of 20, 17.4 minus 10 equals 7.4. We're now greater than 5. We would determine how much greater than 3 the result is. 7.4 minus 3 is 4.4. We would take half of that, or 2.2, and rather than the handicap index being, I think it says 17.2, it would now be 15.0. Kwadwo, is that slide wrong?
No, the slide is not wrong. So this is the hard cap that prevents your handicap index from going up more than 5 over the low handicap index. So the starting point for this member is his low handicap index is 10, which means that if the hard cap applies, he would not go over 5 plus 10, which is 15. That's why the handicap index is now 15, because the hard cap kicks in. If the soft cap was being applied, then the handicap index would have gone up to 15.2. That's using the soft cap. But because the hard cap kicks in, because it's rising more than 5 over the low index of 10, the system caps him at 15.0.
All right, thanks for clarifying that. Any questions on the soft cap, hard cap, and everything else?
Yeah, now while we wait for perhaps for you to digest and maybe ask your questions, I'll make a couple of comments on the lower handicap index. As you all know, we've had this system in use since about January the 8th. And so I have sort of been on the front line. I have seen quite a number of the issues that it has caused. You may have situations where members would complain that my handicap index is not correct. You might have members say that, my handicap index when I finished last year was, 17. Now the system tells me my handicap index is 10. How can that be? I've never been a 10. And these are examples of questions that I have had. And so I will explain to you what's happening. In almost all of those cases, it is an error in the system. And so you should bring it to my attention. Send an email to support@britishcolumbiagolf.org, support@britishcolumbiagolf.org, and I will take care of it. And this is what is happening. As you all know, we began the WHS in January of this year, and we were using scores from last year. And so instead of saying everybody starts from scratch, we rather said we would use your scores from last year. Well, this is where it gets confusing, even for the computer. The low handicap index measures your handicap index over the preceding 365 days. Well, if we go 365 days, we get into last year. And last year, we were using a different system and a different calculation. So what really is your low handicap index, and how is the system to know when your low handicap index should be picked from? And so in those cases where the handicap index has become too low, what has happened is that the system has gone back and has used a low handicap index from last year. And so based on last year, and keep in mind that the calculation for last year was also different from the calculation under WHS. And so the system goes in and says, well, in June of last year, you were 10, and now your handicap index is going to 17. Therefore, we will cap you at 15 or something like that, right? So that's what has been causing the problem, because the system admittedly gets confused as to where to pick the low handicap index from. Once this WHS has rolled through a 365-day period, we would not have this problem. But currently it is happening, not on a massive scale, but to some people. So how do I resolve it? Well, when I get the queries, I take a look at the index, and then as an administrator on the Gulf Canada system, I'm able to go in and reset the low handicap index. Once I reset it, everything corrects itself, and the system then picks your low handicap index from January of this year, instead of going back 365 to pick it from last year. So those are some of the issues that we've had with the low handicap index. So if you do get any questions about that, that is one possibility of what may be happening. And we have the ability to simply reset the low handicap index, and the system corrects itself. Right, we've had a number of questions come in. I will take a look at them. The system calculates this, not the handicap committee, I hope. That is correct, Carol. None of these calculations, the playing conditions calculation or the low index calculation is done by a human being. It's all done by the system. So no one gets involved there. Where the handicap committee can get involved is, for example, where they decide to apply a penalty adjustment to a player. But of course, once they do that, it will be clear in the player's record who has done the adjustment. Another question from Anne, players who have had injuries where they have low handicap, then have not played and are just getting back into the game, what happens? A very good question, Anne. So the system would not know that the player has had an injury, and so the soft cap and the hard cap will kick in. This is where the handicap committee now comes in. The player makes an appeal to the handicap committee. They take a look and they decide that the player is genuinely injured, and so we need to release the cap. So in the system, there is the ability for the handicap committee to go and assign a handicap index to a player. And so, for example, if the calculation of the player's index, player who has been injured, if their index calculation, say, is, let's say, 23 or 15 or whatever the number is, and they are injured, therefore they are shooting higher scores, so their handicap index ought to be around 27 or 20. The handicap committee has the ability to go in and assign the player with a 27 handicap index. And when you go to that screen to do the assignment, the handicap committee can specify how long it lasts. So for example, they could say, you know, we will assign you a 27 index for the next 3 months or for the next 1 month. And then once it expires, if there is no improvement in your physical condition, let us know, we will extend it. So there are options where the handicap committee can come in and either modify the members handicap index or simply assign the player a specific handicap index. And by doing so, the calculation, the soft cap and the hard cap will not kick in. Another question from Ian is, my big question, which might be addressed later, is that the index charts no longer match up with the calculator on the app on your phone. However, online my computer, I cannot find that same calculator anywhere. So is Golf Canada going to add the calculator, or are you sending out new index sheets? The answer is yes, and yes to your questions. We will be getting to the section dealing with paths, but you will soon be finding out that par is a very important part of the World Handicap System, and therefore we have been going through each golf course, each tee, and each hole, and assigning what the correct par ought to be. Once that exercise is completed, we communicate with the golf club, golf course management. They go and they check it, and once everything is satisfactory, then we send them the handicap charts by email, which they can print and show up in the golf house. So we do apologize. We've been working as quickly as possible. And we do know that the golf courses in the interior are currently still inactive. And so we have been working first with the golf courses in the lower mainland, the island first, and then dealing with zone 2. But we expect that in the next couple of weeks, we will complete this exercise of assigning pars. And then when you check your course handicap online, it will display the correct handicap, correct course handicaps for you. So it is ongoing. We will be finishing shortly. So the calculation is actually already there in the system. The reason why you are seeing perhaps course handicaps that are incorrect is because the par assigned to the particular tee you are looking at may be incorrect, and that will shortly be changing. With regards to the new index sheets, we did send communication out to all the golf courses late last year, informing them that the existing sheets that they have are no longer valid and should not be displayed. But I guess perhaps at some golf courses, they may still be displaying the old handicap sheets. But that those are no longer valid and should not be used, should not be referred to. And in the next 2-3 weeks, hopefully we will have all the corrections done to pass, and then you can just simply rely on the app on your phone or on golfcanada.ca, and you should be getting the correct course handicaps displaying there. From Cameron, are there more slides or just question and answer now? There are more slides. We are on slide 48 of 91. So we are about halfway through. You know, if you can type your questions, that would be great. At the end of the presentation, I will stay around, and those that would like to verbalize and rather ask their questions orally, I'll be here to answer them. But just so that you don't forget, if you can either make some notes as we go through or type them in the presentation, we will be available to answer all of your questions. With the virus going on, we have nowhere else to go, so I'll be available the whole day if it's necessary to be. Is there an ETA for the course reviews to be completed? Several interior courses are open now. Yeah, so we originally, our expectation was to have completed all of this by March 1st, but it has taken a bit longer because it is a very involving situation going back and forth, and we have been coordinating, I should say, with the golf courses. What has been happening is that we have been setting the paths, and the golf courses keep coming back to us to try to change the path. So sometimes it's a back and forth before we arrive at the correct path for a golf course. So that's what is making it take a little longer. But in my inbox, I do have quite a ton of emails from golf courses that I'm quickly working through. And I do have some help, so we should have that process completed by the end of the month, or within a week or two into April. We should have all of that completed. I just want to say to appreciate your patience as we get through this stage of the implementation of WHS. If you have any more questions, feel free to type them. Otherwise, Chris Jonasson, the CEO, will proceed with the presentation.
Okay, we are introducing, the World Handicap System is introducing an exceptional score reduction, which is over and above the soft cap and hard cap. An exceptional score reduction is a procedure for dealing with exceptional scores which may indicate the player's true ability. The procedure consists of all scores rather than only tournament scores. So I think earlier somebody asked about competition scores. You know, we will be asking for scores by type to be identified, but exceptional score reduction will happen whether it's recreational play, competitive play, whatever type of play. So there is no real distinction now with tournament scoring. So how does that one work? Well, we would calculate the score differential once score is posted, and any adjustments like playing conditions calculation is applied. We'd calculate the new handicap index, and if the score differential is 7 strokes or better than the handicap index from when the round was played, we would apply the exceptional scoring reduction to the new handicap index. And this is in addition to any reduction that's caused by the score being used in the updated handicap index based on 8 of 20 scores. So in the example that I'm showing you here, you can see that the scores that were circled were 2 exceptional exceptional scores that were recorded within the player's last 20 games. One of them was shot on the 5th of September, and the other was shot on the, I guess, 22nd of May. Both of which were considerably below the handicap index of the player. So Kwadwo, rather than have me stumble through this, do you want to explain how the calculations work?
All right, so this calculation simply, as Chris said, it looks at all of your scores. Under the old system, the tournament reduction only applied to tournament scores posted within the past 12 months. But this looks at all scores that you have posted. And so if the posted score in this example, 4.1, is at least 7 strokes better than the index, then an adjustment is made of -1 is done. If the difference is more than 10 or more, then an adjustment of -2 is done. So in this example, you can have a situation where the player posts 2 rounds within their last 20 games, and both are exceptional by the fact that they are more than 7. The difference is more than 7. And so you would have the first one was applied on May 22nd, and the player shot a 75, and the differential was 4.1. And so an adjustment of -1 was applied. And then the player continued playing. The scores were average or normal. And then on September 5th, the player shot another 75 with a differential of 4.1. And so you have a second adjustment being done of -1. And so you would notice that the -1 applies to all the scores in that member scoring record. So rather than simply applying it to the one score, it spreads it out, and so then it falls out gradually also. But because the first exceptional score is still in the record, then for the scores that apply, for the adjustment that were made to the scores when the first exceptional score was made, those adjustments will now get an additional adjustment, which is why you see that from May and downwards, it has -1, which is an adjustment of -2. But then scores posted above only have a -1 adjustment because they are only referencing the exceptional score posted on September 5th in the record.
Okay, do you want to move to the next slide? No, good. Are there any questions?
So once again, this is also a calculation that is not done by the handicap committee, is not done by British Columbia Golf. It's simply done by the system. Now, the one of the good things that Golf Canada has done is that if you go into your scoring record when you log in through golfcanada.ca, there is a tab that shows you your handicap calculation. I would encourage you all to take a look at that tab because it goes through all the calculation, every adjustment applied to a person's record will show up in the calculation. So you will be able to see if there is any adjustment and what type of adjustment that was applied. So everything will be self-explanatory once you take a look at how the handicap index is calculated, and you see all the adjustments, including the PCC playing conditions calculation adjustment. All of that will show up in the report that shows up in every player's scoring record.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Doug.
Okay, so at this point, I need to play the last video, if you just bear with me for 1 second.
No two golf courses play the same. A score of 87 on a difficult course might be a better performance than a score of 85 on an easy one. It's not just courses that differ. Each player will perform differently, even on the same course. The scratch player, a golfer with a 0 handicap index, will have a different experience from the bogey player, a golfer with a handicap index of around 20 to 24. Playing a round of golf on the same course at the same time in normal conditions, the bogey player will find more challenges with distance, accuracy, and dealing with obstacles. Course ratings and slope ratings allow the handicap system to reflect this, as part of the conversion of a player's handicap index into a playing handicap, so that golfers of differing abilities can have a fair and enjoyable game. Course ratings reflect the playing difficulty under normal conditions for the scratch player. Slope ratings represent the difference in playing difficulty for all players compared to the scratch player. Being a fundamental part of the handicap system, course ratings are carried out methodically by qualified teams, trained by authorized associations. Ratings are based on normal course and weather conditions, with each hole being evaluated for effective playing length and obstacles. The effective length includes factors such as elevation, roll, wind, and altitude. Obstacles include factors such as trees, fairway width, penalty areas, recoverability from rough, and green size. All these factors are assessed separately for both the scratch and bogey player. Once the evaluation process has been completed, the course rating and slope rating is calculated for each set of tees. When it comes to playing a round of golf, course ratings and slope ratings should normally be available on a lookup chart or through an app, which can be used to determine your handicap and how many strokes you'll receive. In bringing together a course rating system that is already in use in many parts of the world, with a consistent method of calculating handicaps, the World Handicap System provides a handicap index which is truly portable, whoever you are, whatever your ability, and wherever you are playing in the world, enabling you to match your skills against other players of differing abilities and making the game even more enjoyable.
All right, Doug?
Okay. The USGA course rating system, as was stated earlier, has been in place in Canada and the United States and several other jurisdictions around the world. But there are a lot of jurisdictions where it hasn't been in place. So this particular slide series will go through relatively quickly because most of you should be familiar with it. We have used the course and slope rating. We haven't talked as much in handicap seminars about the definition of scratch players and bogey players. But when we have evaluated golf courses for course rating purposes, we have done it from the perspective of two different groups of players. The scratch player is the degree of difficulty of a golf course for the scratch player, and we express that as the course rating. So you'll see that as being 71.8 or 72.4 or 66.3. It's the degree of difficulty of a golf course for a scratch player. And there is a definition within the course rating system of a scratch player. We know that the scratch player hits the ball, I believe it's carry 230 yards and or 250 yards and some roll, and how far the second shot goes, and so on and so forth. So it's expressed as the number of strokes taken to one decimal place and is based on yardage and other obstacles to the extent that they affect the scoring difficulty of the scratch player. The bogey rating is the evaluation of the playing difficulty of a course for bogey players under normal course and weather conditions. It is expressed as the number of strokes taken to one decimal point and is based on yardage and other obstacles to the extent that they affect the scoring difficulty of the bogey player. And there is a different definition, not a different definition, but there are different criteria that are expressed for scratch and bogey players on both male and female genders. So to calculate the slope rating for any set of tees, we need two measures. We need to know what the course rating is. We need to know what the bogey rating is. And it is a combination of these two measures that allow us to calculate the slope rating for a particular set of tees. So the course handicap, under the rules of handicapping, a course handicap will be the number of strokes a player receives to play down to par. And this is the first time that the handicap system has introduced the concept of par, to play down to the par of the tees being played. And the formula is your course handicap is equal to the handicap index, your handicap index, times the slope rating of the set of tees that you're playing, divided by 113 plus the course rating minus par. So here we have a table which shows the course rating minus pars for a handicap index of 0 and a handicap index of 15. And this is what the handicap system would have looked like pre-2020 or before we put in without course rating minus par. And you can see that basically the pars from all of the tees were pretty close. From the back tees at over 7,000 yards, par was set at 72. And from the very forward tees at 4,900 yards, par was set at 69. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the same criteria for a 15 handicap. And you can see that under the old system, the course handicap of the scratch player stayed at 0 from all sets of tees. And on the for the bogey player, the handicap index of 15.0, I think it started at, on my screen it's hidden, but I think it started at 18 and comes down to 15 from the very forward tees. So they're relatively compressed as you go through it. So in the World Handicap System, which is this particular screen, you can now see that the there hasn't been, sorry, on the left-hand side, you can see the screen prior to 2020. On the right-hand side, you can see what's changed. And you can now see that where the course handicap has gone from 0 to, well, it stayed at 0. On the other side, it's gone from, in Quadro, I can't see all of the numbers from.
Right. Yeah, it's gone from, so on the left side, it goes from 0 to 0, from black to gold. On the right side, it goes from 2 to +5.
And that's why it's becoming critically important that we spend time to get par correct. So do you want to move on to the next slide?
Yeah, so this is the bogey player. And so for the bogey player, under the old system with an index of 15, going from black to gold, the bogey player's course handicap was 18 to 15. Under the WHS, using the course rating minus par, from black to gold, the bogey player goes from 20 on the black to 10 for the gold. So there is much wider difference under the WHS than under the old system.
Okay, let's move to the next slide. So when course handicaps are used in various formats of play, course handicaps are adjusted to make the competition equitable. And within the rules of handicapping, the adjusted course handicap will be referred to as a playing handicap. So going forward, your playing handicap will be your course handicap times the handicap allowance, and the allowance schedule is set up in the rules of handicapping. And in addition to that, if players are playing from different tees, there will need to be an adjustment in the player's playing handicap, which will be adjusted by the difference in pars. So as an example, if you're playing in a 4-ball competition, the adjustment might be, you know, handicaps calculated at 90% of the player's combined handicap. That will establish what your playing handicap is for that particular competition. Any questions on this section? Okay, Quadro, people may not be quite following everything. Do you want to just talk a little bit more about some of the issues that we've had with some of the clubs on par?
Right. Okay. So yeah, I'll do that, and then Doug is back, so he can proceed on the next session. But so we have had okay. So there's a question here. This really confused me. How does it affect us? Well, there is a new formula in the course handicap calculation. which applies to everyone, which didn't exist under the old system, and that is the course rating minus par. Now, here's how it can affect you. And the person asking the question is Arlene, and I'm presuming that Arlene is female. So here's how it can affect you. In making adjustments to pars, I have had golf courses contact me. Usually they would say that we want all the pars for all of our tees to be the same. So, because they want it to reflect the scorecard. So the scorecard might show a par 72 or a par 71, and they say we want everything to be par 72 and par 71. Well, that creates a problem, because in the course handicap calculation, what happens is that there is a course rating minus par adjustment which is done. And so if par is artificially set and it doesn't reflect the yardage, what would happen is that players will start losing strokes. So your course handicap might show that maybe you need fewer number of strokes than what you actually do, because the course rating and par, there is a big variance between them. So as an example, if you have let's say you have black tees with course rating of say 72.2, and then you have red tees with course rating of 66.6. Now what would happen is that when the system does the calculation of the course handicap for any player, on the black tee, the player will get the full benefit of the strokes that they need, because keep in mind that under the World Handicap System, you are playing to the par, not to the course rating. And so every player will get the benefit of the number of strokes they need when they are playing the black tees. However, if you are playing from the red tees, right, the black tees, we have par set at par 71. If you are playing from the red tees, where the course rating is 66.6 and par is 71, then what would happen is that once the system does the calculation for the course handicap, it will do a further reduction in the number of strokes. And the reason it does this is that it says that this player is playing to a course handicap of 66.6 because you're playing the red tee. Now, under the old system, the player playing the red tee, the target score for that player would be around 66, because that's what the course rating is. Because under the old system, the target score was the course rating, not par. But the golf course hasn't changed. The difficulty hasn't changed. What has changed is that instead of targeting the course rating, now we are targeting par. And now par is set artificially at 71. And so obviously the person who is playing the golf course, who let's say under the old system needed 6 strokes, if the par is set to 72, the assumption might be that this player now needs more strokes to play. And that's where the system now comes in and says, there is such a big difference between the course rating and par, such that we have to reduce the number of strokes this person is getting, because the target for the person is now 72, no longer 66. And so to make it equitable, we have to reduce the strokes that the person is getting, because now the target is 71, not 66. However, if the par for the red with a course rating of 66.6, if the par is set to, let's say, par 67 or 68, that player will get the full benefit of the strokes when they play the red, because no reduction will be necessary, because the target score is still par, which is par 68, And under the old system, target score was 66, thereabouts, 66, 67, because the target was the course rating. And so there is no big difference between 67 and 68. So the player gets the full benefit of the strokes that they need. But if the par is set at 71, what happens is that the system will have to reduce the number of strokes that it gives to the person, because it would say that if you are now playing to 72 instead of 67, you actually need less strokes, not more strokes. And we've seen it happen where it's even become quite illogical, where you would have someone that is playing a forward tee, and by the calculation, that player requires more strokes than when they play the next longer tee. So for example, you may have maybe white tee, you may have maybe blue, white, red. And you could have a situation where when a player is playing the red tee, the system says you need 8 strokes, for example. Then when you play the white tees, it says you need 6 strokes. Obviously, there is a problem somewhere. How can I need 6 strokes when I play the longer white, and then need 8 strokes when I play the shorter red? And the answer is simple. It's because the pars set for the white and the red do not represent what the correct par ought to be. And so the system makes that adjustment. So this is where it becomes important that we have the correct par, instead of artificially saying, well, our scorecard has total par of 71. Can you make everything par 71? If we do that, these are some of the other problems that we create by simply going outside of the guidelines and setting par artificially. But there has been another trend that I have seen, which I've had to, we have had to really insist that we will not allow that. And that has been where we receive requests from golf courses, for example, arguing that they want the men, when they play the red, to be par 71. And then in the same breath, they will say, when the women are playing the blue, we want them to play to par 71. You know, and that has not been fair, because in most cases, I have seen par for ladies at some golf courses being par 79, if you can believe it. I don't think I've seen par more than 80, but I've seen par 79. I've seen several pars that are par 77, simply based on the yardage, because we know how long the female scratch golfer can shoot on the first shot, on the second shot. And sometimes we've had courses say to me that, you know, you have a 434-yard hole. It's a par 4 for the men, and we want it to be par 4 for the women. And the scratch lady can shoot 400 yards, can cover 400 yards on 2 shots. And yet the instruction we've received is to make that hole a par 4 for women, but that hole is a par 5 for the women. So just to give you a quick way to check if par for your golf course correctly represents the difficulty, is simply compare the par to the course rating. Where you see a big difference between par and course rating, the suggestion is that the par actually doesn't reflect the difficulty of the course. And so the system will do an adjustment by reducing the number of strokes for people who are playing, for members playing from tees where the course rating and the par has a big variance. And so the system does that automatically. So those are some of the things that we have had. And so if you perhaps are part of a committee and you've been told that there is that guy at BC Golf, he doesn't want to make the pars the way we want it, this is the explanation. If we simply set par as clubs want it, if we simply set pars as you have it on your scorecard, we create other sets of problems. Now, we've also had questions from golf courses about how do we encourage golfers to tee it forward if we change the pass. And so the argument has been that if we are encouraging maybe the older golfers to tee forward, and we say that, you know, tee from the forward tee, it used to be par 71, par 72, but now it's par 65. So the argument has been that nobody would like to tee it forward. But there are some misunderstandings with this argument. And the first one is that the adjustments to par that we are making is for the purposes of handicapping. So it's so that we can get accurate indexes, because if we don't adjust pars correctly, then the net double bogey numbers will change, because instead of taking a net double bogey of a 7, if you are playing on a par 4 and we make it a par 5, you are going to take an 8, which would mean in theory that indexes over time would not represent the player's ability. And so it's important that we get pars correct, even though we do have older golfers that we want to encourage to tee it forward. But for the sake of getting accurate indexes, we need to, if it's par 65, we need to play it as a par 65 and not arbitrarily set it as a par 71, because older golfers would like to play it as a par 71. Two other suggestions that I have made when golf courses have this dilemma is that for purposes of competition, it's up to it's available to the committee to decide that for purposes of competition, for purposes of determining who the winners are in a competition, we will play this hole as a par 5 instead of playing it as a par 4. So that's allowed, you can do that. But when it comes to posting scores for handicapping purposes, then it has to be posted using the correct par. So if a member who plays in a competition where the par was artificially set by the committee, if that member is posting hole by hole, no problem, the system will do the adjustment. But if that member is posting a total adjusted score, then they have to adjust using what the correct par has to be. Now, there's also been junior golfers or new golfers who have sometimes very forward tees that have been put in by golf courses to encourage more juniors to play. And so for those ones, some of the suggestions we have given is that, and this is not unheard of, a lot of golf courses have scorecards that sometimes they call it members only scorecard, and they have scorecard for the public. So you could easily have a scorecard that you have junior scorecard. And so on that scorecard, you could say, you know, this hole is 198 yards, but you as a junior play it as a par 5, play it as a par 4. It doesn't matter. Have fun as you go out to play. We don't have a problem with that. But if that junior wants to post scores and get a registered index, then we have to ensure we comply with the rules of handicapping by ensuring that if it's 198 yards, it is a par 3, not a par 4, and not a par 5. So those are some of the suggestions that we have been giving out to golf courses to sort of deal with the dilemma of how to encourage the older members, juniors, to play forward tees, even though the pars have been adjusted from, you know, what the scorecard might say, par 7 or par 72. Yes, sir.
Yeah, can I answer Nathan Green's got a question here. I wouldn't mind answering
Sure.
verbally. You can hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Nathan, so like before, if you had people competing from different tee boxes in the same competition, you should have been making an adjustment to their handicap indexes, not just off the charts, but by course rating. So for example, if your course is rated 70 from the back and it was rated 66 from the front, you should have been making an adjustment of 4 strokes on top of the difference of the course handicap from those tees. So let's say the guy playing the back tee was a 2 and the guy playing the front tee from that front tee was a 10. you should have added 4, you should have taken away 4 from that 10 because of the difference in the course rating. So his handicap from the front tee should have been, well, the difference would have been 8, right? 10 minus 2 is 8. I'm trying to get this clear. But 4 strokes should have been taken off that 8 because he was playing the front tee. That was in the old system. That was probably the most common question I got from people. In the new system, you don't have to do that because this is course rating is taken into account with par. The handicap from the player playing from the back tee, the player playing from the front tee, whatever their handicaps are on the chart per se, that is what their handicaps are, and that's the stroke differential they should play under. So if you want your seniors to play against in your men or whatever from a different tee in a net competition, you can use the handicaps right off the chart. You can also use a handicap allowance if you think using 90% would be more fair. That's up to you. There's recommendations in the rules of handicapping. Sorry, go ahead.
Follow-up question. Now, do we have to award the champion based on relative to par? Like if from our back tees, if we're par 73 and the front tees is par 67.
Okay, so I think one thing that's important here is that Kojo it's hard to explain. These pars that we're doing right now, let's call them handicap pars, because really they're pars used for handicap purposes. If we're not recommending that courses change their scorecards, if your par is 71 at Kamloops and you want your par on your scorecard to be 71 from the front tees for men, that's fine. But you have to know, when they should know that for handicap purposes, for maximum hole score, and when we're calculating the handicaps, we're using the handicap par. So I wouldn't recommend that you change pars for competitions with your holes. Because it's complicated, and this is all because of this World Handicapping System, and we wish it wasn't this way. But basically, this new handicap par needs to be used when calculating handicap indexes and needs to be used when doing maximum hole scores to make the system work. Does it need to be used for competitions? No, it doesn't. You can set the pars at whatever you want to set the pars at. Does that kind of answer your question?
Not really,
or
but that's okay.
Confuses it more?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be a tough adjustment because we don't expect people to start putting, our back tees are par 71 and our front tees are par 67. We don't expect that. I don't think anybody's going to do that. But when they look in the handicap system, it is going to say that for some courses, depending on the course, obviously. So that is going to be a hurdle to get over.
Right, but a player's handicap index will be set to course rating minus par.
Yes.
So if you're playing one competition and people are playing different tees, their handicaps are already taking into account that calculation between course rating minus par. So it should be just a straight net competition among everybody.
And that is a good part of the system. So there shouldn't be any adjustment have to be made. Everybody can play different tees, just use their handicaps as they are, and everybody should be playing a fair competition. All right. I want to continue with okay. Let's go to the next slide, Kojo, and we'll see how we do. So it is strongly recommended the handicap committee conducts a handicap review at least once a year for all players for which it was responsible. So you haven't been doing this in the past, especially at the end of this year. If you're on the handicap committee, we would like you to do a handicap review of every player. So that means printing out reports, looking at what's going on, and seeing if there's any anomalies. World Handicap System compliant technology should provide reports to assist handicap committees identify those players requiring a handicap review. So Golf Canada uses the actual handicap calculations by a company named GolfNet. They are coming up with reports that should help you greatly in doing that. So it should be able to point out players that have anomalies in the system. A player can request a handicap review if they believe their handicap index no longer reflects their demonstrated ability. So this could be somebody that's had a recent injury, or just for some reason thinks, you know what, this handicap, there's no way I can play to this handicap, something's gone wrong. they can request a handicap review, and that would come to the committee, and you then have to look at things. And then obviously we would then help you if you want to call Kojo and talk about what their scoring system, what their scores look like, and why they believe that their handicap index no longer reflects their ability. A player must be aware of and be involved in the handicap review process and be able to appeal a decision. So if you're going to go in and change something in the system to somebody's handicap, you should always involve the player. They should be involved right from the get-go. I understand sometimes that doesn't happen, but they should definitely be involved. If you're lowering their handicap for any reason, they should be involved, and they should be able to appeal the decision. And obviously that could come to BC Golf if it needs to. Hopefully with this new system, all these safeguards have been put into place so this doesn't happen, but we know that things do happen. Does that make sense? Is that good, Kojo, or is there something you want to add to that?
No, that's good.
Okay. Please ask questions if you want. Okay, review could involve the analysis of any or all of the following information. Frequency of score submissions in the last 12 months versus previous 12-month cycles. So basically, are they submitting every score they play, or is there maybe there's reason to believe they haven't? Deviations from the expected scoring performance for the player. So all of a sudden their scores go way up, and there's no real reason why. It could be a problem. The trend of the player's handicap index, differences in players' handicap index over the last 12 months or 24 months. So, if their handicap's steadily going up, okay, that could make sense, or steadily going down. But if it's taking huge jumps, then maybe there's something going on. The player's scoring record history, sorry, kind of talked about that. Percentage of acceptable scores submitted at a player's home club. So are they playing way more away rounds than they are at the home club? And why is that? Or is there a good reason for that? Percentage of acceptable scores from 9-hole rounds. Any scores from or performances known in non-authorized formats of play. Comparison of average score differentials in match play versus stroke play. So maybe they play way better in match play versus stroke play, and there can be reasons for that, but maybe not. Comparison of average score differentials between competitive and casual rounds. We kind of know that sometimes some people score a lot higher, usually, in competitive rounds, but some people score a lot lower, and is there a reason for that? Just go back for a second, Kojo, sorry for going over that. For example, at Bear Mountain, where I was kind of managing this for a while, we had some people that questioned their handicap. So we did it, and I'm sure people have done this. We went in and saw, okay, how many rounds have they actually got in the system? Like how many in our tee sheet system, how many rounds have they played? And then how many scores have they actually posted? And if there's a big differential between those, then okay, why is that? And you might have to ask the player why. It says you played 40 rounds, but you've only got 15 scores entered. What's going on? So things like that. There are some things that the committee should be looking at. Sorry, Kojo, go ahead. Adjusting a handicap index. When a handicap review has been completed, the handicap committee can adjust a player's handicap index to better reflect their demonstrated ability based on the results of the analysis. But the adjustment must satisfy the following criteria: be a minimum of 1 full stroke, and except in exceptional circumstances, only increase a player's handicap index by up to 5 strokes above their low handicap index. But there is no limit as to how far downwards a handicap index can be adjusted. So they're suggesting that hard cap be kind of used as a basis. So somebody, has an injury or something like that, you want to look at it and, hopefully only increase their handicap by 5. If there's exceptional circumstance, then maybe more, but it has to be an exceptional circumstance. But if you're putting handicap down lower, there's no limit. Okay, Kojo? The handicap committee can adjust a player's handicap index to ensure that it reflects their demonstrated ability. In doing so, the handicap committee should consider all available information relating to the player's demonstrated ability, including the player's scoring potential, any handicaps previously held by the player, whether the player is an improver, a steady player, or a declining player, temporary or permanent injury. The handicap committee should consult with or have ratified any player's handicap adjustment by us, by BC Golf. So if you've done a review and you think, okay, we're going to adjust this person's handicap, please let us know and we can give you some hopefully some guidance. The adjustment upward or downward must have the effect of freezing, modifying the handicap index for a defined period of time as determined by the handicap committee, or resetting the handicap index by applying an adjustment to each of the most recent 20 score differentials in the scoring record to achieve the chosen handicap index. That second one is probably what we want to happen more often. If a player fails to submit a score from authorized format of play, the handicap committee should investigate and take appropriate action. So somebody hasn't posted scores when they probably should have. If the reason was valid and an acceptable score is still discoverable, that score will be posted. If there is no valid reason and an acceptable score is discoverable, that score will be posted. If the score is not discoverable, a penalty score may be posted. In the most serious cases, such as repeated failure to submit acceptable scores, the committee has discretion to apply additional penalty scores, reset the player's handicap index, or consider other disciplinary measures. So if somebody is just playing a lot of golf and not posting scores, then you have to make a decision as a committee to either apply additional penalty scores, reset the player's handicap index, or consider other disciplinary measures. And that's a tough one. The handicap committee, or BC Golf, should withdraw the handicap index of a player who deliberately or repeatedly fails to comply with the player's responsibilities under the rules of handicapping. The withdrawal of a player's handicap index should be applied only after the player has been informed and has had the opportunity to respond to the handicap committee and/or BC Golf. A player must be notified of the period of handicap index withdrawal and any additional conditions. So it comes really to a serious point, we might just withdraw that player's handicap index. Reinstatement of a player's handicap index will be required when a player's handicap index is withdrawn for a period of time, after which it will become eligible or reinstated. And that would be something that COJO or BC Golf would do, right? To determine the level of a handicap index at which the player is to be reinstated, the handicap committee may wish to consider reinstating the handicap index at a level that the handicap committee feels is currently reflective of the player's demonstrated ability, applying the handicap allocation procedure as if the player were new to the game, or reinstating the last recorded handicap index. It is strongly recommended that under this option, the handicap committee monitors the player's handicap index closely over the subsequent rounds and, where required, makes appropriate adjustments. So obviously, BC Golf, we can't look at everybody's handicap. That's part of why we have people at each golf course, and we're hoping that you can help us monitor people's handicaps and let us know if anything looks wrong or looks kind of off. We have a question from Ian here. Women versus men. Why is it not just one rating? Well, Ian, it's not just one rating because the course ratings are based on how far somebody hits the golf ball in the air and how far it rolls, and where the penalty areas and where forced carries are, depending on those things. So the course rating has to be different, just as it's different. There's a bogey golfer rating and there's a scratch golfer rating, and it has to be different for women and men too, just based on club head speed and how far they hit the ball. The past shot, women shot 80 as an average or on a regular basis. So I'm going to read this. In the past, if a man shot 80 and a woman shot 80 as an average, or on a regular basis from the forward tee, and the ratings were 66 for a man and 72 for women, their handicaps would be around 14 and 8, yet they play the same tees and shoot the same score. How does this new system address this, and what adjustments need to be made? Well, I don't think the new system does anything for that, Ian, because it is different for the woman. The woman actually, compared to other women, is a better player than that man under the system. So I don't know quite how to answer that. Kojo, you can help me out if you want.
Well, no, yeah. So there is no further adjustment because actually the process is the same as how it used to be under the old system. Under the old system, you would be looking at course rating. So you may have the lady playing from, I don't know, 72.5, the man is playing from 66. You would do an adjustment. Now, instead of using course rating, you are using par. And so if there is a difference in the par, then you do the next step of the adjustment, which is under the old system, if there was a difference, you still go to the second stage of the adjustment. So the only thing that's changed is instead of looking at course rating, you are looking at par. Then the process is still the same if there's a difference in pars. But the expectation is that there would be very minimal differences in pars, such that the next stage of the adjustments should be rarely made.
Yeah. Keith says, do we need to have separate scorecard for maximum scores then? Is there guidance on how to use the analysis information? Okay, the first question. Again, if we all do hole by hole, then there's no problem at all. If we don't do hole by hole scores, if we're putting in a gross score or a score for 18 holes, then people need to know what the handicap pars are. So Keith, the handicap pars are going to be in the system, in Golf Canada's system. Hopefully they're looking at them. If they are much different than the pars in your scorecards, especially for your members, you want to tell them that somehow, that, hey, look, these are the handicap pars, and you want to base your maximum scores on those handicap pars. The system definitely will if you enter hole by hole. Is there guidance on how to use the analysis information? Coach, I don't even know if we have the analysis information yet. So it's tough to, we definitely will come out with some guidance, or we can definitely answer those questions. Does the handicap committee have to review all players once a year? So basically, we would like you to review all your players, but there are going to be reports that will flag the players that you need to look at. So basically, at the end of the year, there are going to be reports that you can print out from the handicap system that will flag players that have anomalies in their system. And those are the players you want to look at. If you want to look at every player, that'd be up to you, depending on how many players you have. That
right.
makes sense? Yeah.
And if I can just comment on the
of course.
questions, and then you can proceed. So the answer to whether you would need separate scorecards, it's not at the moment. What I've seen happen is that as golf courses are printing new scorecards, they have been mindful of the fact that now par has become much more important, and they are somehow trying to show the different pars on the scorecards. We expect that the scorecard printing companies will be able to design scorecards that would reflect the different pars. But the answer is that right now, no, you don't have to have a separate scorecard. But if, let's say, your scorecards would run out in, let's say, in a year, and you are now about to reprint, I suspect that at that point, you may be more inclined to try to reflect the different pars on your scorecards at that time. The second part, the analysis information, there is some information available, so it really depends on what analysis that you are looking for. If it's something that currently exists, I can certainly generate the report and send it your way or to your golf course. So there are some existing reports, but I'm not entirely sure what analysis, further analysis that you may be looking for. Just reach out to me, and if it's available, I will send it your way. Back to you, Doug.
Okay. Anne says here, yes, the handicap jerseys look check scores. Okay, thank you. I want to know how those who golf all over as in zone 2, who checks their scores for tournaments. And we're hoping that this new system, because of the way it does things, that you won't have to check tournament scores. That's a tough one to answer. I know I'm kind of in charge of looking at BC players, and which is a lot of players in our system, and I try to look at the tournament scores versus the normal scores. But with this new system, and with the soft cap and the hard cap, and with the exceptional scores, hopefully that takes care of these things, so we won't have to check these things anymore. That's what we're hoping. We're going to have to see how this whole system lays out, but that's what it seems to be. Ian, I'm not sure how to answer your question. We do need different ratings just because of that, the different distances that players hit it, women versus men, and how the golf course plays. It does play very different for some women, or for most women, than it does for most men. These are all obviously just on averages, so you're always going to have outliers, but definitely the normal woman playing a golf course plays it very differently than the normal man. So that's why the course ratings and slopes have to be different. Yeah. Okay.
Doug, there is one last question there.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, but if you're wanting to speed up play, you need to know during the round what handicap pars are. You're right, Keith. If you want people to pick up after their maximum score, hopefully they do know what handicap pars are. And as Kojo was saying, hopefully as we move forward, we can find a way to put those on scorecards that people can see very easily and know what their maximum hole score is. No easy way to do this, I don't think, but hopefully we can come up with a system. I know at most golf courses that I've managed at, we just say double par, and that kind of covers things. And it's definitely more than their maximum. It might, it could speed up a little bit more, but it does help just to have a very simple thing for players that to know when to pick up, I guess, as you'd say. But that's up to each individual golf course to figure out, for sure. Okay. Oh, I disagree. Okay. We can agree to disagree, Ian. That's fine.
Right. Yeah, Ian, while I mean, there may be some merit to your point, but the reality is that the rules of handicapping, the course rating system, is what we are using, and so we have to play by the rules in there. And currently, that's what we have. So there are other sort of other things in the golf world that we don't have answers to. So, for example, why can't we have a course and slope rating for 7 holes? Why can't we have course and slope rating if I'm only interested in playing 5 holes? Why can't I post it? So all of these are valid questions, but the answers are that we cannot go outside of the course handicapping, the course rating system. We cannot go outside of the rules of handicapping and do that. So currently, the rules say that we must have different ratings for both men and women. So for that to change, would have to come from the world governing body. So yeah, we may be able to argue the pros and cons, but even if we agree with you, we can't change it because we don't have the mandate to simply change that. Otherwise, the handicaps we will produce will not reflect the rules as provided by the World Handicapping System.
Thanks, Kojo. Very well said. Okay, a competition committee. The committee in charge of competition may set a maximum limit for play within their terms of the competition. So we know that maximum handicap now is 54, but as I said before, that doesn't mean that you have to allow a 54 handicap in a net competition. So you can set a maximum handicap index for entry. You can set a maximum handicap index of players permitted to use, a maximum course handicap, and a maximum playing handicap. So you're welcome to say, hey, no matter what your handicap index is, the maximum playing handicap for this event is 36 or whatever number you want to come up with. For example, a limit of 18 may be set by the committee, with higher handicap index players being restricted to playing from a handicap index of 18.0 for the purposes of that competition. Even though higher handicap players are restricted to playing from a handicap index of 18 in this example, their full course handicap should be used in determining the score to post for handicap purposes. So even though you restrict the handicap index or the playing index for somebody in an event, they should still use their maximum hole score based on their real handicap index for posting the score. The committee in charge of a competition may reserve the right to adjust the playing handicap of an entrant within its terms of the competition where they have evidence that the player's handicap index does not reflect their demonstrated ability. Hopefully you don't have to use that very often, but you do have that right. For multi-round competitions which are played during the same or consecutive days, it is strongly recommended that a term of competition is introduced to state the handicap index used at the start of the competition be used for the duration of the event for the ease of competition administration purposes. Scores should still be posted by the end of each day. In a situation when a new round is played before the player's handicap index has been updated, the committee in charge of the competition or the handicap committee has a discretion to decide the playing handicap the player should use. So this is really hasn't changed. Usually when you play a tournament, you say, okay, handicaps will be frozen as of this date or used as of this date, and you can still do that. That's certainly under your rights as a competition committee. Here's a little bit about the handicap allowances. This is in the handicap manual. the rules of handicapping, as it's now called. Handicap allowances are recommended to provide equity for various forms of team competition. Under the rules of handicapping, the allowance recommendations will be the same for men and women. So what's interesting to me on this is if you look at stroke play on the right, for single stroke play or for Stableford, they're actually saying to use 95% of somebody's handicap to multiply by 95%. And that's, I don't know if that's done very often, but it's something that we're going to do at BC Golf. Hopefully the system makes it easy. Hopefully your system makes it easy for that to do. And you can see the different percentages there, all the way down into scrambles. And these are not just picked out of the air. These are mathematical competitions. They've been beta tested. There's definitely math behind this. This is not just something that somebody's guessing at. Any questions on that? Yes, these slides will be, this whole presentation, we're recording it. It's going to be available on the website, and these slides will also be available on the website for sure. Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, question there. That question there for you.
From Andy. Yeah, and so the rules of handicapping would recommend that they use 95%. They don't have to. It's just a recommendation. So yes, that would be the recommendation.
All right, so in case anyone is wondering, we have just about 11 slides to go through, and we come to the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Kojo.
A couple more minutes and we'll be done.
Just a couple. I'm sure, Kojo, we can. Do we have everybody's emails that is on this seminar right now?
For those who received who signed up using Eventbrite, we will be. I have all the emails for
okay. So we can send them a link. I would think that we can do that.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm pretty sure even if we don't have your email, that some way somehow you will get access to it.
Yes, they'll definitely have access. Yes, but if you want to, yeah. How will these changes be communicated to the non-club players? Well, we're doing our best through all the channels we have in terms of our newsletters and in terms of everything else. We're going to send. We've already put in our newsletters all these changes under the WHS that players should be. Obviously, this is more complicated what we're doing today, but that players should be advised of. Again, that the main thing for a player is to do hole-by-hole entry. If we get everybody to do hole-by-hole entry, that will simplify things greatly in terms of. So if somebody came to me, just a normal person that plays at ABC Golf Club, they're not a member, and they're just getting a handicap index, my main recommendation would just be enter scores hole-by-hole, and they should be fine. I don't know how much of this the average golfer wants to know or get involved with, especially if they're just starting out. Kojo, I'll let you take Gary's question here about being certified.
All right, thanks, Gary, for that. Both the USG and Golf Canada are working on the certification program. It's not yet ready, so it's not out yet, but as soon as it's out, it will be available on the internet. And so you can take it in the comfort of your own home, answer the questions, and then you would become certified. So as soon as that's available, I'm pretty sure through our regular communication channels, you will be made aware of, and you can take the course when it's available.
Yeah, we'll let everybody know for sure. Okay, stroke index allocation. The rules of handicapping will recommend using course rating data to rank the holes for stroke index allocation. The recommendation is to allocate odd strokes in the front and even strokes in the back. Specific strokes will be allocated using 3-hole clusters, with a recommendation for the number 1 and number 2 stroke holes in the middle clusters. So most of you, all of you have your golf courses have stroke holes right now. In the past, it didn't really matter for handicap purposes where those stroke holes were. where the allocations were. It does matter now, as you I'm sure you can understand, with the importance of par. So if you want to relook at those, you definitely can. Again, these are recommendations. Don't think we're forcing anything on you, but because some of you have done a lot of work in terms of determining your hole allocations, and we understand that. But the course rating system can recommend where it would recommend, math would recommend that they are. And that's what this is. And COJO will be sending reports out to golf courses as we go. Obviously, we have some priorities right now. This isn't high on the priority list, but we will get them out to you during the year.
Right. Thank you for that. And one quick important note as to why we have to insist that we have the correct pass. You look at the stroke allocation, I have seen it happen where you have maybe a hole that's a par 4, and it's the #1 stroke hole. You change the par from 4 to 5, just changing par. That hole moves from stroke #1 to stroke number 17. I have seen that happen. And that's simply just one change in par makes it go from 1 to 17. So obviously, if we don't have the pars set correctly, if they are artificial, it's going to affect stroke allocation tables. And so if you would be using the allocation from WHS, you may be saying this is the most difficult hole, stroke number, whatever. But if the par is not accurate, it may actually not be reflecting the correct allocation. This is another reason why we need golf courses to work with us to set correct pars and not simply make pars reflect what has traditionally been on the scorecards.
Certain procedures should also be considered to accommodate both stroke play and match play formats, including, and you can look at your scorecards and see how your course matches up to this. Spreading stroke index allocations evenly over the 18 holes to give the best chance of strokes being received by a player prior to a match ending. So not having all your, your 2 and 4 and 6 stroke holes as your 16th and 17th and 18th. That might not be the best idea. Applying the second lowest stroke index, hole 3 or 4, on each 9 in either the first or third triad, unless the lowest stroke index hole has been allocated in that same triad. So there's a whole bunch, this is a recommendation, this is how the system figures things out. It's trying to spread things evenly across. It's also trying to spread out the, like in terms of the front 9, if you have the first and third stroke allocation holes, you want to spread those out whenever possible. So if possible, avoid consecutive low stroke indexes, 6 or less on consecutive holes, and stroke index allocations for strokes 19 to 36 and 37 to 54. Simply repeat the order of the stroke index allocation above, which is how we've always done things. So if you get 19 strokes, you get your 2 strokes on the first hole. So this is Pheasant Glen on the silver tees for men, and it shows you kind of the ranking of the holes under course rank or course rating. It shows you the ranking of the holes. It shows you the odds and evens distribution, and then how the stroke index actually turned out using those things that they just said in the last slide. So they do change, trying to spread things out across the course. Oops. And sorry about that. And here's the same for females, for women. Same kind of thing. Here's a chart that probably should have showed before, but because of the new course handicap calculation, net par and net double bogey, it's important to have accurate pars. We're talking a lot about that for each hole determined for both men and women. Ideally, par will be printed alongside each hole in the scorecard. It is recommended that par is established in accordance with the hole lengths indicated in the table. BC Golf can also take into consideration the way the hole is designed to be played. So you can see these have changed. Par 3 is up to now 260 yards for men. Par 4 is up to 490, par 5 and par 6. Women, and again, we can change these. If you have a par 4, or you have a hole that's 460 yards, and you think, boy, that should be a par 5. Well, that's fine. And we've even gone below those yards. I don't know how much COJO wants to talk about that, but if you have a hole that's 440 yards, you think, really, this is designed to be a par 5, and it plays uphill, we can make that a par 5. But if it's 390 yards from the front tee, it's very hard to argue that for a scratch handicap, that hole is a par 5. And so that's how we're trying to go through each golf course and then get feedback from the courses to set the pars. And that is a procedure we're going through right now. Adjudicating hole par. Where hole lengths fall on a break point, it may be appropriate to designate par relative to the way the hole was designed to be played. We just talked about that a little bit. For example, men's hole lengths from all sets of tees on a specific hole lie within the recommended par 4 range, except for the forward tee at 250 yards. If the hole is designed to be played as a par 4, then it can be assigned as such. And we'll have the final, BC Golf will have the final say if there's a dispute. So, for example, I was talking to Olympic View. I don't know if everybody's played Olympic View. The 12th hole there is a very narrow little island kind of fairway, and they hit way uphill to the green. And their forward tee for the men is at 230 yards, I think. But to me and to us, that's still a par 4 because really there's hardly any way to hit that green on your first shot, even if you're a scratch player, because it plays so uphill and such a small area, and there's nowhere around the green to miss. So there are things like that to take into account, and we try to answer those questions as we go along. But it is a process to go through. Temporary ratings. Okay, so this is if you've got an unrated set of tees. When a tee has not been rated, the following protocol can be used. We locate the nearest set of rated tees for the appropriate gender. We determine the measured difference between the set of tees being played and the rated set of tees. For differences under 100 yards, there is no adjustment necessary and scores can be returned or posted as usual. For differences between 100 and 300 yards, a table value can be used to determine a temporary course rating and slope rating. So for example, you've got a par 4 in your golf course that usually plays 400 yards, but you're doing work on the fairway, on the tee, and you've turned into a par 3 for a month or 2 or maybe more. Obviously you can call Kojo and say, look, at this, what we've done. Hole number 12 now is a par 3 from this yardage. Can we get a temporary course rating and slope rating? So that can be done. But if you're just working on the tee and you're just moving the tee up 50 yards and making the hole shorter, but the hole's the same, then it's under 100 yards and there'll be no adjustment necessary. So if there's permanent modification, though, please notify us as soon as you can. And permanent changes to the course require us to review the current course rating and slope rating to determine whether a re-rating is necessary. So depending on how big the course changes are, we might have to come out physically and re-rate. If it's just moving a bunker or a building of a new tee, we can usually do it without a course visit. Is that right, Kojo? Yeah.
That is correct.
Okay. So Ian, the way that the World Handicap System uses it for handicap par, anyway, what I'm calling handicap par, is what the par would be for a scratch player on that hole.
From the correct set of tees.
From the correct set of tees, yes. Thank you, Chris. Is this stroke index allocation report now available? Kojo is, as I say, working through this. We have to get the pars set properly on every course before we do the stroke index allocations, as Kojo just kind of went over. It's very important that we get the pars correct first and get them locked down, if you want to say, and then he will be producing stroke index allocations reports and get them out to the golf courses. If you're doing a scorecard, right away, or you need this, please let Kojo know. Send him an email, and we'll try our best to get it out to you as soon as we can. Here's some key definitions. You want to know now that the lowest handicap index is the lowest handicap index achieved by a player within the last 12 months. Hopefully you've got a little bit of an idea of what a hard and soft cap are now. The main thing is that hard cap doesn't allow the handicap to go more than 5 over the low handicap index. Playing conditions calculation, talked about that. Hopefully you've got a little bit of an idea what it is. Again, based on the scores from that day's play on the golf course that are put in before midnight. If they're way out of whack in terms of what the normal variations would be, a playing conditions calculation could be put on that day. Exceptional hole reduction, a score differential which is at least 7 strokes better than the player's handicap index at the time the round was played. So if that happens, that automatically happens. It's nothing you have to do. This automatically happens in the system. Hopefully we know what a net double bogey is, and that's why par is so important for that. And net par is a new term for par plus used when a hole is not played. So we used to say par plus in terms of, if you played 16 holes and wanted to know what to put down for 17 and 18 to put your score in, we used to put par plus, or we used to talk about it in terms of par plus. Now we talk about it in terms of net par. So those are some key definitions. The following resources are being developed to enable golfers and golf clubs to learn about the rules of handicapping. The Rules of Handicapping book, as Chris said, the hard copy has been mailed out to every golf course. It is downloadable off of Golf Canada's site. The Player's Guide and booklet is again available on Golf Canada's site. The committee guide, do we have that yet, Kojo?
No, not out yet. USGA is still developing it.
Okay. We have some videos that we showed you today, and we can get those to you if you want. And there is more information on the RNA site and on the USGA site about the World Handicap System. Do we have any posters yet to send out, Kojo? Sorry, I should know this, but
no, we are still waiting to receive them for Golf Canada to make them ready.
okay. So as soon as we have them from Golf Canada, you will have them in your hands. Thank you for your attendance today. Obviously, without you, we couldn't do what we do. We do appreciate your volunteering your time and helping us make sure this game is fair for everybody and that everybody can play against everybody else and hopefully have a good competition.
I think we do have some.
I have a couple questions, yes. Sorry, I haven't looked at the questions.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
Okay, par plus one more time, please, for unfinished hole. Okay, Linda, I'm assuming you mean, so if somebody doesn't play a hole, doesn't start the hole, they would put in, so let's say they're an 18 handicap, that means they would get one stroke in every hole, so they would put in a bogey for that hole. If they get 2 strokes on that hole, they would put in a double bogey for that hole, and so on. If they get 0 strokes on that hole, then they would put in a par for that hole. I'm hoping that's what your question was. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you, Linda. What about handicap certification? So, Brian, I hope you heard Kojo say there that there will be an online course. It's not available yet, but as soon as it becomes available, we'll send a link to everybody, and you can take that course online in the comfort of your own home. With COVID-19, some courses are taking measures by having their cups 1 inch above the surface of the green. Some courses are installing their cups upside down, yes. Yeah. Are scores in these courses still going to be valid for handicap purposes? I'm assuming they would. And I think your assumption is right. I just got something today. I don't have it in front of me. Chris, do you have that in front of me, that note from the RNA?
Yeah, the Scottish Golf Federation and the RNA have advised that scores posted with the cup above the level of the ground would be valid for handicap purposes.
Yes. So, Jason, I know we don't like to assume, but your assumption was correct. Can we order? You can order extra copies of the Rules of Handicapping from Golf Canada, Donna. There is a golf kind of a golf score, an e-store, I think they call it, on Golf Canada, where you can order the rules books or Rules of Handicapping and some other things. Okay. I'm glad we're answering some people's questions. I know this is complicated. There's a lot more to it than most. When we give the seminar, a lot of people are like, wow, there's a lot more to this than I thought. Again, today was a lot more complicated a seminar than we would give to the normal player. We're trying to give you a background into the Rules of Handicapping and how it works in the back. So there's a lot of information there, and it will take some time to digest.
So, Anne says, the report you said we could get at the end of the year to check our members, can we get it any time? I do know that under the old system, the reports were available. I haven't checked it, but I would answer yes, that they should be there. The only thing is that you would probably not get any information displayed because we have just started WHS. But the reports should be there, and I would expect that by the end of the year, yes, you would be able to get all the reports to run it and be able to do your the handicapping review that the rules require that you do.
Yeah, so and I think those reports were available to be run by the club at the club level at any time, and hopefully these new reports will be the same. That's what we're hoping.
Okay, any more questions? Now I'm going to be ending the recording, but I'll still be on if any of you would like to verbalize your questions. We'll be here to answer them, but I'm just going to stop the recording right now.